Some stories stay buried beneath the ocean. Others continue to move in the dark water. This is one of them. Welcome to Tales of the Dark. If you dare to listen further, subscribe before the lights flicker out. Long before the Titanic ever touched the water, the men who built it, the shipyard workers, whispered stories among themselves. Strange sounds echoed from inside the massive, unfinished hull. The soft patter of light footsteps on decks that should have been empty. The sound of a woman crying softly in a space where no one was standing. And then there was the shadow, a fleeting darkness that appeared near the spot where the grand staircase would eventually be built. Months before a single piece of that famous stairway was even installed, the workers complained of strange, sudden cold spots that seemed to follow them, clinging to their backs as if someone, or something, was walking right behind their shoulders. Some men quit their jobs over it. Others flat out refused to go into the lower decks alone. They all said the same thing. The ship felt awake. One worker reportedly vanished for several hours, causing a panic among his crew. When he finally reappeared, shaken and pale, he insisted he'd walked into a completed cabin, a luxury suite, fully furnished one that shouldn't have existed yet. He said that inside that impossible cabin sat a woman in an old-fashioned dress, just staring out toward the ocean through a porthole that wasn't there. She looked at him, he said, and whispered a single, chilling phrase, "Don't let them sail." The worker walked off the job the next morning and never came back. When the Titanic finally launched and set sail on its maiden voyage, the passengers flooding its decks were filled with excitement and wonder, completely unaware of the grim rumors that were practically stamped into the ship's steel frame. But it didn't take long for some of them to start noticing the same odd things the shipbuilders had. In the first few nights at sea, people reported hearing distant music, a phantom orchestra drifting down empty corridors late at night. They heard faint humming coming from vacant rooms. They saw doors softly closing on their own, with no draft or person nearby. And then there was the shadow again, this time seen moving along the deck railings, a dark figure pacing as if it were watching the passengers below. One family later recounted a particularly unsettling experience. They were woken up by someone quietly knocking on their cabin door at exactly 3:12 in the morning. When they opened it, the hallway was empty. No one was there. But on the floor, there was a small puddle of water, with droplets leading away from their door, and then stopping in the middle of the hall, leading nowhere at all. A steward, a man who had spent years working on other ocean liners, later claimed he saw a figure walking near the boiler rooms, deep in the heart of the ship. He described a tall man dressed in outdated clothing, looking as if he'd just been pulled from the ocean, soaking wet from head to toe. Yet, as the man walked, he left no footprints, not a single drop of water on the dry floor. The steward, confused and a little unnerved, decided to follow him. The strange man walked calmly toward a solid steel wall, and then, right before the steward's eyes, walked straight into it and vanished. Rumors began to spread quietly among the crew. They gave the apparition names. Some called him the silent passenger. Others whispered he was the one who drowned before the ship sank. On the fourth night of the voyage, the air grew heavy. Something shifted. In different cabins, across different decks, several passengers woke up at once, gasping from the very same dream. They dreamed of a voice whispering from beneath the floorboards of their rooms, a desperate, pleading voice, begging the ship to stop, begging it to turn back. These passengers were strangers. They had never spoken to each other. Yet, when they later shared their experiences, they all described the same voice, the same fearful tone, the same urgent warning. But perhaps the strangest and most unsettling event happened on the forward deck. Out in the biting cold of the North Atlantic night, multiple, unrelated passengers saw a woman standing at the very tip of the bow, motionless, her gaze fixed on the freezing, black water ahead. Her dress looked decades out of date, its fabric moving gently in a breeze that didn't exist. The night air was unnervingly still. A concerned deck officer saw her and approached, intending to ask if she needed help, worried she might be in distress. But as he got closer, just as he was about to speak, she simply wasn't there. She had vanished into thin air. There were no footsteps, no sound of her leaving. All that remained was the faint, unmistakable smell of salt water lingering in the spot where she had been standing. That was the final night the Titanic would sail peacefully. As the hours ticked by, the shadows aboard the ship seemed to grow stronger, more present, as if they were no longer just watching, but waiting. And when the colossal iceberg finally came into view, looming out of the darkness, several crew members on watch would later insist on this one terrifying detail. In the moments before impact, they heard someone whispering a warning, a clear, panicked whisper that didn't come from any living person on the deck. To see what truly happened after the ship began sinking, keep watching Tales of the Dark, and subscribe before part 2 begins. The ocean is never quiet, especially where the Titanic sleeps. It was just before midnight on April 14, 1912, when the world's most magnificent ship met its fate. But the story didn't end when the iceberg struck. For those who survived, it was just the beginning of a different kind of terror. As the initial jolt ran through the vessel, something else awakened. Survivors later described the atmosphere shifting instantly, as if an unseen presence moved rapidly through the corridors. The brilliant electric lights, a symbol of modern marvel, began to flicker erratically. Shadows in the grand hallways stretched unnaturally long, twisting into shapes that didn't belong. A profound chill settled in, a cold that felt deeper and more ancient than the freezing air outside. It wasn't just the fear of a sinking ship. It was a feeling of being watched. Some survivors, in hushed tones long after the disaster, admitted that, amidst the escalating panic, they saw figures moving calmly through the chaos. These weren't crew members rushing to their posts, or passengers scrambling for lifeboats. These figures didn't seem to be panicking at all. They drifted through the crowds, their faces serene, their movements unhurried, as if they were merely observers to a play they had seen many times before. They were there one moment and gone the next, leaving behind only a lingering sense of unease and a question that would haunt survivors for the rest of their lives. Who were they? One first-class passenger recounted a particularly vivid encounter. He saw a man in a dark, heavy coat, standing near a stairwell, quietly guiding people toward the lifeboats on the upper deck. But something was wrong. Others who saw the man insisted that no crew member wore clothing like his. His coat looked too old, frayed and tattered at the edges, almost as if it belonged to another century entirely. The passenger, distracted by a sudden lurch of the ship, looked away for just a second. When he looked back, the mysterious man was gone. Yet, the heavy oak doors he had been pointing to, which should have been latched, swung open on their own, revealing a clear path to safety. Was he a guardian angel, or something else entirely? As the icy Atlantic water poured into the lower decks, a new, unsettling sound began to echo through the steel hull. Several survivors, trapped in the narrowing corridors, described hearing a faint knocking. It wasn't the groaning of stressed metal or the crash of water against bulkheads. This was different. It came from inside the walls, a steady, soft, rhythmic tapping, like someone was trapped behind the steel plates, desperately asking to be let out. The sound was maddening, impossible. One terrified crewman, working to close a watertight door, swore he saw the impossible. For a fleeting moment, he saw the faint outline of hands press against the cold metal from the other side, fingerprints forming in the condensation before fading away like mist. He never spoke of it again until years later, his voice still trembling with the memory. From the relative safety of the lifeboats, the remaining survivors witnessed something even stranger. They watched in horrified silence as the great ship began its final, violent tilt into the abyss. And on the slanted decks, under the cold, indifferent light of the stars, they saw faint silhouettes. Not passengers running or screaming, not crew fighting to launch the last boats. These figures were walking calmly across the deck. Some appeared to be looking up at the sky, as if admiring the celestial display. Others were staring directly down into the dark, churning sea that was about to claim their vessel. As the survivors watched, dumbfounded, the silhouettes simply dissolved into the cold night air, one by one, vanishing just moments before the ship's stern rose high into the air and began its final plunge. They weren't ghosts of the dying. They felt like something that had been there all along. After the Titanic disappeared beneath the waves, the horror for those in the lifeboats was far from over. The freezing water was filled with the desperate cries of over 1,000 people. But mixed in with those tragic sounds, many survivors reported hearing something else. Soft murmurs, whispers. They weren't cries for help, but something unintelligible, almost conversational, as if the ocean itself was speaking back to them. The eerie sound continued for minutes. Some claimed it went on for hours, long after the last human cries had faded into silence. It was a chilling chorus from the deep, a sound that would forever be etched into their memory. A final, ghostly farewell from the ship that was supposed to be unsinkable. Decades later, in 1985, when explorers finally located the wreck, resting 2.5 miles beneath the surface, the same strange phenomena seemed to return. The mission to explore the Titanic was plagued by unexplained technical difficulties. Submersible equipment, built to withstand immense pressure, would suddenly pick up whispers at impossible depths. The powerful external lights on the robotic vehicles would flicker and die without reason. Cameras would malfunction, recording static just as they focused on a specific part of the ship. One veteran diver, a man who had explored countless wrecks, surfaced pale and shaken. He claimed he saw a woman in a white dress walking past a collapsed hallway deep inside the wreck. His description perfectly matched the accounts of a mysterious female figure seen by passengers on the night of the sinking. Another diver on a later expedition refused to ever return to the site. While exploring a section of the ship that was completely sealed and filled with water, he heard it. Footsteps, clear as day, right behind him. He spun around, his light cutting through the darkness, but there was nothing. Just the silent, decaying grandeur of the ship's interior. The sound was impossible, illogical, yet he heard it. He aborted the dive immediately, convinced he was not alone down there. The wreck, it seemed, was not as dormant as it appeared. It held its secrets close, guarded by the echoes of that fateful night. To this day, experts cannot definitively explain the anomalous sounds recorded near the wreck. Sonar sweeps have captured audio that defies logical explanation. Skeptics say it's just the sound of the decaying metal shifting under immense pressure, or the movement of deep-sea currents through the ship's broken structure. But many audio analysts who have studied the tapes disagree. They admit that some of the whispers do not match any known natural underwater pattern. When filtered and amplified, they almost sound like sentences, fragments of words struggling to form in the crushing dark. The Titanic, resting in its watery grave, carries not only history, but something else. It holds memories that never died, echoes that never faded, and shadows that still walk its silent, ghostly corridors, forever bound to the ship of dreams. This is the story of the drowned shadows of Titanic, a ship built with pride, cursed with whispers, and now resting in eternal darkness. You've been watching Tales of the Dark. If you want more stories from the deep, subscribe before the lights go out.